Our story begins in ancient England, precisely 1002, with the birth of Edward the Confessor in Islip, Oxfordshire. You see, England at the time was very susceptible to Viking attacks, which occurred frequently, and Edward's father, King Ethelred the Unready, was very paranoid. When he began to fear for his person, he decided to do something about it, and so he massacred countless Viking settlers on what came to be known as the St. Brice's Day Massacre.
This angered the Danish king Sweyn Forkbeard, and he launched a full-scale invasion of England. Ethelred was already buckling under the heavy damages caused by the Vikings and their raids, and he knew that a full-time war would be a catastrophe, so he tried to bribe the Vikings into not attacking. This did not work, and Sweyn pressed forward, only slowed briefly by defection against him by Thorkel the Tall.
In 1013, Ethelred was forced to go into hiding in Normandy, France, where his wife was from. Sweyn took over as king after heavily pressuring the English nobility. Unfortunately, Sweyn dropped dead from unknown causes a few weeks later, and Ethelred managed to take over for 2 years, but was constantly getting raided by Sweyn's son Canute. He died for unknown reasons in 1016, and his son Edmund Ironside tried to defend England from Canute, but eventually was killed in battle. Canute succeeded him as king after having to put out a small rebellion. Canute ruled for 20 years until his death in 1035.
It was now that Edward tried to come back to the mainland with his brother Alfred. Since Canute was dead and England had no leader, their plan was simple: infiltrate the English nobility with the help of Godwin, Earl of Wessex, and convince them to make Alfred the king. This plan didn't go so well when Godwin did two simple things. One, he got a fire poker, and two, proceeded to blind Alfred with the end of it.
Alfred later died from his wounds. Godwin may have done this because he was in league with Harold Harefoot, the next Viking king, although it is not clear what he got out of the alliance. After the death of his brother, Edward headed back to Normandy. After Harold Harefoot's death in 1040, his half-brother Harthacnut took over the throne. Fun fact, Harthacnut had some beef with Harold Harefoot and threw his dead body in a swamp.
Godwin was in a bit of a pickle because he had lent his full support to Harold Harefoot, who Harthacnut despised. When Harthacnut died in 1042, Godwin breathed a huge sigh of relief because while he was a very powerful man, it would only have been a matter of time before Harthacnut broke him down. Edward had the most viable claim to the throne, so he returned and was crowned king. Edward ruled peacefully, but many earls, including Godwin, did not like that he was bringing a lot of Normans over Normandy into the nobility. Things finally came to a climax when Godwin, angry about a Norman bishop Edward had appointed, assembled a militia and threatened Gloucester, the city which Edward was currently in. Edward managed to disband Godwin's army and banished him from England.
In 1052, Godwin assembled an army, and with his show of force, convinced Edward to let him back on the nobility. In 1053, Godwin died, but his sons will be an important factor in the battles ahead. In January 1066, Edward was lying on his deathbed. Harold Godwinson, who was, as you may have guessed, Godwin's son, went in to hear Edward's last words. He came out a few minutes later, declaring that Edward was dead.
Guys! Edward's dead! But he said I could be the next king, so just saying.
But that just before he died, he proclaimed Harold as his heir. As you can imagine, this would be a bit hard to believe, but since Edward never had a son, there was no clear heir, and the English nobility went through with it. This angered quite a few people, however, because it was a well-known fact that Edward had promised the throne to his friend William I of Normandy. William was especially mad because Harold himself had promised William the throne over holy relics. Maybe Harold had done this because William was holding him hostage at the time, but I like to believe it was out of the goodness of his heart. Killing kings was seen as wrong because it was believed they were chosen by God, so William had a little chat with the Pope, who said it was completely justified to kill this king. So William prepared his army.
Back in England, Harold knew that William would probably try to invade, so he prepared his army. There was just one problem. The wind was blowing the wrong way, preventing the ships from sailing in. Wind keeping William in Normandy, Harold finally got sick of waiting and disbanded his army. His timing could have not been worse, because Harold Hardrada, the king of Norway, invaded just a few weeks after Harold disbanded his army. Harold's claim to the throne was that he was the descendant of King Canute, and so he was the next king of England.
Now, there were 3 powerful contenders to the throne, but wait, there's another key player. You see, Harold had quite a few brothers, and one of them had been exiled 1 year previously. His name was Tostig Godwinson, and his motivation was a bit different than Harold's. Tostig just wanted revenge on Harold because Harold had played a key role in exiling him. Harold had to pull his army back together and make the exhausting march up to where Harold and Tostig's army had landed after they had formed an alliance. Northumbria, roughly 185 miles away, in just 4 days.
The Vikings were caught completely off guard by the speed of Harold, and as so much of them were not wearing their burnies or armor, Harold was able to win because of his cavalry and his superior numbers. Both Tostig and Harold died in battle. Meanwhile, in Normandy, the wind finally blew the other way, and William sailed over the English Channel. Harold marched back down almost as fast as he marched up, and the final battle was about to begin.
Harold was vastly outnumbered, 3-1, and so was forced to take a defensive position in the form of a shield wall. As the battle drew on, the English were slowly wearing the Normans down. When the Norman right flank broke ranks and ran away, the Anglo-Saxons rejoiced and chased after them, only to get encircled by William's cavalry and suffer heavy casualties. There was some debate as to if this was a deliberate tactic by the Normans or merely a fluke caused by panic. But either way, William won. Harold was killed in the Battle of Hastings, the most popular theory being he was shot in the eye with an arrow. Guys, you don't think this is true? Oh, God! Oh, jeez! Ah! The pen! Ah!
England didn't immediately accept William's rule, so he had to raise a couple of villages, but eventually the rest of the Anglo-Saxons surrendered. As William was being crowned, a nearby village cried out for their support for William, but his soldiers were startled and razed that to the ground as well.
Since the nobility were now Norman, a lot of changes occurred, but one of the most interesting was in the English language. Since the Normans were French, they mixed French with ancient English. In general, the more proper or official a word is, the more Norman it is. For example, an Anglo-Saxon would come into a room, but a Norman would enter a chamber. An Anglo-Saxon would have a house, but a Norman would possess a mansion. One particularly interesting one is meat. When an Anglo-Saxon farmed, he would farm pigs, but when the pigs were killed and served up to the Normans, they became pork.
In terms of diplomatic successes and diplomatic failures, this was most definitely a failure, as most of the diplomacy was decided in battle or through threats. This was just a common pattern in medieval times, a theme being the power struggle of succession, and the rise and fall of kings would continue in medieval Europe for a long time.
We have a lot of people to thank this project for, like
ourselves. We didn't not to be confused with other ourselves. We did most of the work.
Yeah, our triple E teacher helped us.
Yeah, he guided us to the right path, the right topic, everything else.
Let's see.
And we thought we wouldn't finish this project on time. We barely did. This is, as we're recording this is the day before it's due. And so
many times we thought we weren't gonna finish on time.
Yesterday. Then the day after that. But we managed to, and I really hope that you guys like this because it took so long, and if you fail us, I'm gonna be so mad. Thank you.